My stomach twisted as the engines of the old vessel roared louder. It was the creation of Rake, third perfect from the Academy of Natural Philosophy. He was exhilarated, savoring each of the small craft's utilations. Rake pulled a lever and a great gout of smoke surrounded us. The smell of burning whale oil grew unbearable as the machine propelled itself upward. I was too afraid to look through the window, which suddenly didn't feel thick enough. As if knowing my thoughts, Overseer Bryn looked at me and smiled. Recite some of the litany, my pupil. It'll protect your heart from the turpitude of the void on our way to the outer spheres. Rake was elated, like a boy of 16 on the eve of Fugue Feast. When we are back in Gristol, I'll be named Royal Physician, or you will be burned for heresy. Third perfect. All depends on what we find when we get there. My master's voice was different, as if the air of the outer spheres had the qualities normally absent. Uncertainty, weakness, fear. I risked another glance at the monolithic structure in the distance. It was a wonder for Rake, a puzzle for Observer Brian, and for me, a towering monument for emptiness, a magnificent shrine to madness. I do not fear the void, nor am I concerned with the spiritual sanctity of the weak, for I am now his herald, his chosen, having seen his sublime vault, where eternally he feeds upon the substance of the void. Alone in Rake's ship, the floor painted red with life. I draw designs with my fingers and gaze through the portals at the land rising below. There, I will build the first monument to his glory, a rotting wound in the flesh of nature. Patiently, I'll build, awaiting your arrival, O great Scion of the Void. When I play Dishonored, there's one thing I always look out for, and that is the complete freedom of choice within the gameplay and story. Now this won't be the only thing I'll cover in this video, but I thought it would be a good tagline to get people invested. This video will be divided up into a few chapters similar to the game, but I won't be following any linear storyline, but I'll do my best to mark the sections since I want this to be more concise and coherent than my previous content. So the other day I was watching a video on the making of Dishonored, and I heard one of the game devs say, "You are the author of your own experience." I don't think no truer words have been spoken about this game. Of course this is within the choices the dev gives you to play around with, but the level of freedom for choice that is seemingly at almost every edge of this game is something to marvel at, and I think more games should take from. It feels just enough to allow the player to comfortably get into the shoes of their own character, but not so overwhelming that it leaves the player confused and frustrated. So let's look at a few of these choices. We can first start off with something the game shows you very early. Actually, the game does a great job at tutorializing almost everything you need to know within the first 15 minutes. But let's look at the Bone Charm. On the surface, they just look to be a simple upgrade you can give your character that gives you moderately better stats in certain areas. But then you realize after a few missions, there's tons of these. Each of them do something completely different, and your ability to freely mix and match and change around different Bone Charms to support your current playstyle is a beauty. Each one of them has a notable effect on a player. Searching for these and equipping them is a choice all on their own. The devs use this not only to give the player a reward for traversal, but also the way to lure the player into bits of interesting lore they wouldn't find otherwise, and maybe even key bits of info on different ways to tackle a mission. The ones I really liked using was the Blood Ox Heart, Reinforced Bolts, Strong Arms, and Acrobat. Now some of these are better than others, but I think it's a very simple choice that also bleeds into more of the game as a whole, since it supports traversal and level design. This also gets a lot more interesting and engaging when you get the Curse Bone Charms in the DLC, and I think it should have been done this way throughout the entire game, because they not only add a positive but also a negative effect, so it leaves the player spending more thought and care into how they want to build their character, similar to a true RPG. Which, Dishonored is a role-playing game, but it led into the more immersive sim style. There's no XP trees, but it does offer what most RPGs should offer, and that is multiple ways to tackle quests, but it goes deeper than that. However, we will go into more detail about that later, because I'd like to keep this flowing. So let's talk about the thing next to Bone Charms and upgrades, which are runes. Runes are similar to Bone Charms in the fact they are an upgrade for the player, but they work in completely different ways. Yes, they still incentivize traversal, leading the player to important areas, and that fact alone makes it a very fun thing to collect. It doesn't feel like I'm checking things off a map, like in a formulaic Ubisoft game designed to keep you playing for 100 hours, since every collectible in Dishonored served to empower the player and the level design. Which is in part the reason Dishonored feels so fun to play. You get stronger throughout the game in a very tangible way. Each rune you collect directly helps you unlock new abilities and powers, and all of them fit in this little realm of being a master assassin. Few of my favorite in the base game will be Blink to quickly teleport to rooftops or get a tricky drop on an enemy, Bend Time, which you can use in a number of creative ways, and Wind Blast, which is just endlessly fun to play around with, and really helps with crowd control. This only helps to increase the player options to interact with different parts of the world. Each one is equally fun to play with and even more interesting when you're able to combine different abilities to take out enemies or escape them. Now the different sections I have planned are bleeding together at this point, because that's what Dishonored is good at. A combination of many factors that all work together to create an enriching experience as a whole. The game couldn't work if it removed any one of these levels of options. So in order to talk about one, I almost have to talk about how it works with another. And I think this one is the most important. Traversal through the world, which Bone Charms and Room directly help create this a very engaging experience, allowing you to get to places you haven't before with newer upgrades. When I first walk into a new area, my mind is flooded with thoughts and excitement of how many nooks and crannies I'm going to get myself into. Where is the quickest way to get to the high ground? Where is a good angle to watch guards to where I won't be seen, so I can make a plan? Which ledge will give me the least visibility so I can get to another building? Is there any upgrades here? What about over here? Now that didn't do it justice, but it makes me think. Constantly I am thinking to myself, what is the best way to get to a place while avoiding as many obstacles as I can? The game is great at giving you just enough framing when you enter an area to show you the many options on the low and high ground to where you can go. You are also treated to some of the most beautiful visual design I've ever seen in a game. Sometimes I'm just left there breathless, almost in tears as to how beautifully tragic this world looks. Every frame is a painting that could sell for millions in an art museum or just something I hang on my wall. The game is also very thick with this overwhelming feeling I'm not sure how to describe. I think it's the fact that this world feels real. These characters feel like real people. All these books that lay around help me better picture the world around and within Dunwall. I've really grown attached to this place and it's hard to let go after I start playing. Now earlier I said beautifully tragic, because underneath all the surface beauty, there is a deep, disturbing and disgusting underbelly of pain and suffering, sickness, government conspiracies, and an almost complete fascist control on the world. Almost everyone is here trying to chase after their own power at nearly any cost. Since the world is so beaten down by the plague, it easily leaves room for someone to come in and make their own mark. Good or bad? Mostly bad, but your choice in the world is to either fight against or become the tyrant. Now I'm not the biggest believer in eye for an eye, which I think the devs weren't too, since even if you're going around killing everybody, the world will let you know even if you think you're doing it for good, you'll be looked down upon. Since these men you kill are mostly just doing their job, which is even sadder if you think about it, and the amount of detail that is given to you just boils down to a simple enemy you need to take out, is really what makes the world come alive. I feel remorseful killing just based off this fact alone. I don't need the game to wag its finger at me. I'm sure most of these men didn't want to work in this position, but they almost had no other choice. It was either kill or be killed, but it goes deeper. Since they were put on the job, the only way they could stomach the actual duties they were given is if they completely remove all empathy from their body. There can't be a single sign of remorse for these people they kill in the streets. Even if they are turned to weepers, they were once humans, and besides, what if a cure does come? Who will be there to cure if the guards killed off all the surviving sick people left? I want to take a closer look into one singular interaction in the game that I think really shows this well and will maybe help us get a better understanding as to what is really going on in these people's heads.
You haven't been thinking again, have you?
No, sir. Not thinking. I was just wondering, if Sokolov is testing elixirs on people to cure the plague, why is it he always asks for healthy citizens? I mean, if you follow my meaning, sir.
You have no mind for natural philosophy. Obviously, it's because the ones already sick with plague don't live long enough to provide Sokolov with any useful information.
It's just a shame is all. Like that woman the other day. She was easy to look at. Seemed nice enough. Shame she has to die, I mean, and so horrible like too.
Now you listen to me. It's none of our concern the how or why of things. And if you want your elixir rations, then I suggest you stop your wondering. These are pigs. Pigs for Sokolov's experiments. And pigs mean nothing to me. Understand?
Right. I mean, why worry about a couple of disgusting smelly pigs, you know? All pigs get slaughtered sooner or later. Better if I wonder about those sounds we heard from the warehouse, right? I mean, what was that all about?
That's better. You'll go far, Grayson.
The battle between apathy and empathy. Within the everyday guard and soldier in Dunwall, one example I want to look at is something that may stop the player's eye on their way to capture Sokolov. That is the conversation between an officer and a guard. And it really got me to thinking about the government of Dishonored. How they train these guards to show nothing but apathy towards the civilians in the world, claiming the plague spreading worse than it is. They don't directly state this, but they show it in one of the scripted conversations. Usually they are there to bring more information to a current mission, but this one is different. Like, it's better to ignore it and see it as a duty instead of facing the atrocity. This is really dark if you think about it. This brings a lot of insight onto the state of this world here. I can't help but think of how the Nazis must have trained their soldiers in order to stomach the eradication and disgusting acts towards the Jewish people. Except in this case, we are dealing with plague-ridden civilians, but I think the devs intended this connection. And it's also a video game, no lives were actually hurt. Here, one guard is expressing a bit of remorse and sympathy to the people they lock in cages, since he knows they will eventually be killed. Well, he is immediately shot down by the officer threatening to cut his rations to keep him in line, and calls the civilians pigs. This is a man completely stripped of all empathy, and is almost disgusted at the prospect of saving just one of these people. The other guard quickly shuts down and awkwardly figures out a way to change the topic and turn a blind eye in order to possibly stay alive, because this is fear tactics. But more than that, it gives the enemies in the game more depth than they normally would have. It gives them character. I honestly felt like this guy didn't deserve to die. He probably feels he could do some good in the world if he wasn't wearing this uniform. He was fed a lie, most likely through fear-mongering that every single person who isn't in the same uniform as him is an enemy and should be taken out by command. Or else he will be taken out by his commanding officer. I can only imagine what is going on within this guy's mind, and I wonder if there are any other guards who feel this way. I call it draconian love. I'm sure given a chance, this guy would run away with the prisoners to start a new life somewhere safe and far away from here. Maybe start a farm and live on the land. Have a wife and a couple of kids. But that is all a dream. A dream resting on the shelf of fascist rule. We can see there's still good in people like Empress Sesame who still see them as her people and will do anything to protect them. Not pigs that need to be cooked for dinner. Sadly, it doesn't turn out this way. We could see this plan to wipe them out play out, and it was straight up the Lord Regent's plan if you choose to play his admission tape over the loudspeaker. He wholeheartedly believes that the rich work for everything they have, and all the poor people deserve none of that.
Rid us of those scoundrels who waste their days in filth and drink, without homes or occupations other than to beg for the coin for which the rest of us toil. And it was a simple plan. Bring the disease-bearing rats from the Pandician continent and let them take care of the poor for us. The plan worked perfectly at first. But the rats, it was as if they sought to undo me. They hid from the catchers and bred at sickening rate. Soon it didn't matter. Rich, poor, all were falling sick. And then people began to ask questions.
And should be eradicated if they dare ask for a bowl of soup. Which, may I add, is a very old conservative standing point, and to extent a belief that is still around today. Now, before you leave a reactionary comment, it's true, so do some research. This is exactly what it reminds me of, which is a whole nother conversation that I'm not smart enough to talk about. But more importantly, it's a monarchy of absolutes, with tons of people grasping for power, and the rat plague is a perfect excuse to make a move, and do what they wanted to all along. Create a class of rich people at the top and poor people at the bottom. And if that means killing them all off in a complete authoritarian rule, or scare them enough to be slave labor, then that's what they will do. Because this is a deeply instilled belief, and through books and dialogue, it seems this place wasn't that much better before the plague either. Which, this is all oddly similar to how late-stage capitalism has turned out, which I would quickly turn away from because I know getting political will turn away a lot of people. But this is how the game speaks to me, and I think I've done a decent amount of research, so I know this isn't exactly capitalism, but it is a very absolute right-wing version of it. Maybe under Jessamine it was a bit better, but the power role she has is too alluring to not be taken over. Everyone in the world is reaching for power. That is why when your friends inevitably betray you, whether you saw it coming or not, it fits right into this narrative beat. While it was terrible finding out half the people who thought was helping you, turns out you were helping them reach an even more ultimate goal, to hold the most amount of power out of everyone else. It's almost like a more complex version of some child playground game, except this involves life and death. You killed all the other people in their way, and now the final piece is to get you out of the picture, but that didn't work now, didn't it? This is effective because the game spends more than half of its time building up your relationship with these people. You're listening to their side conversations, going through their books, interacting with them. It's just enough to make you really care for them, and ain't it just adorable seeing Emily be taught by Callista? So when the betrayal twist does happen, you understand it, but goddamn, it does really feel shitty. Because there are some great people in this group, but again, it comes down to the one with the most power. In the end though, if you go a non-lethal route, Havoc seems to show remorse and regret for what he did. He admits things have gotten out of hand, and this fight for power has destroyed almost every character. Left to Havelock, he finally realizes how trivial it is. While it's not the most fun ending to play, it's the most interesting one in storytelling and conveys exactly what I think the game wanted to tell all along. The grab for authoritarian power leaves nothing but piles behind you until you're alone on the throne, reflecting on what could have gone different if you weren't so struck by gold. To think, behind these uniforms and ideas, we could have been friends. Wait, this isn't my Far Cry 2 script. What happened? Oh no.
Everything is going wrong. I've lost the ideas. Fuck this. Okay.
I will talk more about this later, but I want to move on to level design now to take a break from this darkness. Before I move on too far though, I want to show a song that perfectly showcases exactly what I was talking about with the guards earlier. It's called Habeas Corpus, Draconian Love, off of LP's 2007 album, I'll Sleep When You're Dead. If you want more insight into this idea. It really puts into perspective on just one interaction in the game that I think is a story of a bigger picture that really helps us understand what is really going on behind the uniform. Again, it's a battle between apathy and empathy, with an overhang of no real power over how you can show that empathy. This song is beautiful and perfectly encapsulates this idea. The entire album is amazing, but the one song is just something else. Let's get away from all this violence that lives inside each other's heads and link back to something I mentioned earlier, which is the multiple choice option the game gives you to not only tackle a quest, but how each choice you make affects the world later down the road. We can keep it simple and look at the first real area you get to mess around in since you come back in right after, and it makes an effort to show a tangible way how your actions affect the world. As you boat into the distillery district, you were told there is a war raging in the streets, fighting for what's left. A wall of light that'll kill you if you step through it, and Granny Rags, who isn't that right in the head. As you first move into the area, you notice guards are dropping dead bodies off the river, and it gives you a picture of how the world is doing through interaction. If you want, you can pull out the heart and get the bone charm near them, but you will most likely have to get into a fight and alert the area to your presence, so for now, we will move past them. But you are free to get this as soon as you enter the area if you want to, and you are rewarded with some food and coins too. We come up the stairs and we see the wall of light we were told about. We can disable it and go right into the action, but on the first playthrough, most players aren't experienced enough to get into a fight like this, with all the guards there are, so most players will be encouraged to go down the right alley. Of course, this is an option and you could head right in, but let's look around first. We walk ahead and see somebody throwing stuff off their balcony talking to themselves. This is our introduction to Granny Rags. I hate this bitch. Not that she's written bad, she's just a terrible person. But we can help her if we want to for a handsome reward. We learn she is a bit deranged though, and everyone is terrified of her, saying she's some kind of witch. After we help her out, she gives us a rune and then asks us to do something else for her. A gang in the town has been bothering her non-stop and wants us to literally poison their entire supply of elixir they're making for them to get off her back, and will give us another rune for the job. This is where most players will back down, since this will kill half the city, but for our sake, let's take the offer and do what she asked. Before we leave though, we can head back in and grab another rune, which the outsider will come and give us some history on Granny Rags, and that she's more deceiving than she looks, and then questions what choice will we make. Keep in mind, everything I've done here is optional. If you wanted, you could have went right in and killed Campbell and left. This area is rich with choices, but let's move on. We could sneak or fight into the Bottle Street Gang territory, lethally or non-lethal. Poison their distillery and take a couple bone charms, and then make our way out. After we loot the shit out of the area, of course. Now this may be a bit morbid. We just poisoned an entire distillery meant to heal against the rat plague for a little rune. While this rune does help us in a moment, let's keep moving to find out what happens when we return. We run into Martin and free him, who reminds us of our mission and gives us some info on the options we got. Find where Emily is and get rid of Campbell. Got it. We go through this beautifully expansive mansion and either kill or humiliate Campbell, destroying the area's morale. We can kill or knock out at any time, but I chose to be as violent as possible to show the effects of our actions. A bit of a digress, but I'm still amazed at the sheer amount of openness this level has. You could spend hours just finding every little place you can go through. I mean, you barely even touch more than a quarter of the map to get the mission done, but I think it's useful regardless to explore, especially on your first playthrough, to learn the most effective route. Anyways, let's move on to our eventual return of this area. You roll up in a boat again like last time, but now something is different. There's this newly installed machine. You see people being blown up on the bridge by the guards for seemingly no reason while running away. This watchtower will be there no matter what you did the first time in this level, but instead of showing you a direct effect from your cause, it's there to make you question whether or not Corvo is doing what's right for the city. It shows that Corvo's actions have a negative impact on leftover civilization, causing the government to hold more harsh grip on the city since one of their leaders have been taken out, which becomes a more prominent theme as the game continues. Despite Corvo's best efforts to rectify his dishonor, his actions still matter good or bad. And well, it mostly makes the city a worse place. But slightly better if you choke out a couple people along the way. By all accounts, this is not only brilliant and well-polished game design, but also amazing storytelling through the medium of video games. Instead of telling you, the game shows you what will happen through the actions of the player, and it's really effective. So yeah, come to find out, maybe poisoning an entire distillery wasn't the best decision. The town is now infested with weepers, sick, plague-ridden people who will puke bile all over you to get you sick. They're almost like zombies in a way, but we talked about the way they are treated earlier, but here it symbolizes a direct conversation between the player and the game. Your actions matter more than you thought, and now you can't be playing around. The rest of the game is full of these small and big effect and cause moments until the final moment. Every inch of the world is teeming with surprise, so no matter what choice you make sure you think of the consequences, because despite your best intentions, you could still be actively making the world a worse place. That's all I really wanted to say in this matter, so let's move on to a sort of conclusion. Dishonored is a game that revolves around power and choice in the story and world building. Every character is trying for a grasp at power. Few rise, many fall. But at the center of nearly every action is about gaining or regaining power. From political officials, corporate greeters, guards and soldiers, civilians, weepers, and even rats. Each one of these classes of people have some power that was either given, removed, or they are actively trying to gain that power. Whatever they think of it. Even the people who take you in were using you for their own political power the entire time. Their plan was perfect. They got you close enough for your trust to be placed on them so they could pull the rug and make their run off with Emily. It's perfect, since Corvo may be the most physically powerful being at the time, so they needed a foolproof plan to really gain their own power. Going by canon, out of every single person who's been planning and plotting so long they haven't taken a shower, Corvo, with incredible power, never abused or used that for their own personal gain. It's a great mediator. Now there are many examples from the DLC I could use, but I'd like to stick with the base game to keep it simple. But Dod's story may be a bit more, well, powerful. But back to Corvo. He could have easily taken these powers and used it to kill every single man in his way to get his revenge. I mean, it's called Dishonored, and Corvo may be the most dishonored one in the entire story. Well, despite the world that we inhabit. But out of anyone, Corvo is someone who I would say would be justified to do whatever it takes to regain his honorable power, hour by hour, but instead he chose to be a flower. Jesus Christ, why did I write that in there? Growing and blooming while actively trying to spray and pray the pesticides. He resticized his anger he felt, and held it back because he knew that would be better for Dunwall, better for Emily, and better for the world as a whole. A fractured but whole world, mediated by one man against a world grasping for power and control. So, that is all for now. Thanks for watching, and remember, greed is good. Wait, what?